Hi everyone, I'm Joanna Penn from thecreativepenn.com, and today I'm here with John Lee Dumas. Hi John.
I'm excited to be here, Joanna. Thanks for having me. Let's rock the mic.
Oh yes, absolutely. And just a little introduction in case people don't know John. John is the host of Entrepreneur on Fire, where he interviews successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. He's grown EOFire into a multi-million-dollar a year business with over 1,500 interviews and 1.5 million monthly listens. And his latest project, which we're excited about today, is the Mastery Journal, Master Productivity, Discipline and Focus in 100 days. And I think you've got it there, haven't you, John?
I got it right here, hot off the presses, literally.
Woohoo!
Silver embossed. Oh, it's a masterpiece.
That is awesome. And we are going to get into that because we're very interested in merchandising on this show as authors. Now, I actually have your Freedom one here, so I'm going to wave that too, as a fan. But, this Mastery Journal, before we get into the publishing side, it's about productivity, discipline, focus. And I know you were in the military originally, and I want to know, because this is something authors really struggle with. We want to write, but it's hard to get in the chair. So, give us some of your tips for getting things done, because, you are pretty much a master at this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wasn't always a master at this. So it came through work, it came through time, it came through research. And, you were very kind, to wave the Freedom Journal very quickly in front of the camera. So thank you for that, because that, to me, was my first kind of dipping of my toe into the merchandising world, into creating an actual physical product. And it was a great experience because the idea came from people like yourself, Joanna, because all of my listeners were saying, John, what do your past guests on EOFire all have in common? And I realized every one of my guests of EOFire who are successful entrepreneurs, they know how to set and accomplish goals, period. They have that down. They knock it out of the park. And my audience that was struggling with that very same thing. So I came up with the idea to create a journal to guide people through accomplishing their number one goal in 100 days. So very specific, one goal, 100 days, knock it out, crush it, get on with your life, do that next thing. And so that was a huge success. It became the 6th most funded publishing campaign of all time on Kickstarter. It did over $453,000 in just 33 days in revenue. So, talking about merchandising, there is real money when you find the right product to serve to your audience that knows, likes, and trusts you. So those are some key things that we have to keep in mind when we do that. But, moving forward, I realized that there's something really special about the Freedom Journal because it was about what my guests had in common. But what are my greatest strengths? What's brought me from nothing 4 years ago when I launched EOFire with no audience, no skill sets, no real knowledge about entrepreneurship to now here we are, 4 years later, a multi-million-dollar a year business, having generated over $10 million actually to date since we launched. How did I create that? What are my strengths? And those 3 strengths, Joanna, as you mentioned, were productivity, they were discipline, they were focus. We can get into all 3 of those specific traits as you kind of get deeper into this interview, but I want to answer your specific question before I stop talking here, and that is, what's one thing that I see as writers really being able to use maybe the Mastery Journal or just, their own heads to start that writing process, because we love to procrastinate. Excuse me, we love to procrastinate. So I love the phrase, win tomorrow today. And it's actually the last thing you do every single night with the Mastery Journal. You win tomorrow today, because the reason why people lose, they wake up in the morning, they don't have any specific, they know they have things to do, but they're not quite sure what those things are or what order they should accomplish them. So your brain, it just goes quickly to the escape route of, well, let's just check our email real quick. Let's just jump on Facebook real quick. That's other people's agenda, OPA. You're putting out other people's fires. You're not doing something meaningful for yourself or your business. So if you win tomorrow today by sitting down the end of the night, writing down a task list, I call it the morning routine. You write your morning routine. Guess what happens? You wake up in the morning, you no longer have this empty void in your head about what you're going to do. You know from the night before exactly what the next 9 steps of your life are, including exercise, if that's part of it, if you're going to do, the whole routine, whatever that might be, and you can just jump right into it. And that procrastination disappears because now you're just following your preordained day.
Yeah, and I totally get that. And I'm someone who plans a lot and does that. But I think I know a lot of creative people struggle with this word discipline as well. And what you're saying is quite structured. And the word discipline often sounds quite painful. I think people think it's painful, but you clearly love what you do. You're very passionate about what you do. This is not just about money. You're helping people, and these journals are part of that too. So how do people keep the joy in discipline and focus?
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because I will say, now that I've done a few of these interviews about the Mastery Journal, a kind of common theme has started to bubble to the surface that I actually had no idea was going to. But now you've said it. A couple of my past guests have talked about it. Like I was on Andrew Warner's Mixergy. I was talking with Dan Miller from 48 Days to the Work You Love. And they both just kind of attached like an interesting thing around the word discipline. I mean, maybe it's because I'm military. Like discipline to me has always been like important and a great thing. Like if you have discipline, you're a winner. But they've both said, like, and again, it's been coming from other areas as well, is like, like discipline doesn't always sound fun. Like, like that's something that kind of people are in some ways maybe repelled by, and it just kind of seems scary. Like, I don't want to live a life that's disciplined, or whatever that might be, any way, shape, or form. So how I kind of like to rephrase that is by saying, like, listen, by being disciplined, you're actually giving yourself so much more freedom than you would ever have. As people who aren't disciplined, they just get pulled, tugged, and just screamed at from every direction, and they don't even know how to deal with it. So like, your life is not your own when you don't have a disciplined plan of attack. So, kind of going back to that morning routine, if you are willing to be disciplined, and by the word, I love the roots of the word discipline, it's disciple. So I mean, that's kind of something to think about. Maybe if you don't like the word discipline, think about the root of the word, which is disciple. That was something that Andrew Warner pulled out that I just loved. I was like, I'm stealing that because that's amazing. But if you think about it that way and say, hey, like, I'm actually going to sit down, craft a plan of action that I'm then going to execute. When you do something like that, that's a disciplined plan. You're then opening up the rest of your day to do other things, to give yourself freedom, because you've already done what needs to happen to move your business forward, to write that chapter, to do that editing, to do whatever it might be that is so important to your business that, usually people just push it back to the end of the day and we have no more energy left. And we're just like, okay, now I'm going to edit that chapter. Like, really? Like, after you just spent all of your brain cells doing other people's agenda? That's why you need discipline. That's why you need that plan. And that's why you need to execute on that plan.
And I think, you're an entrepreneur, I'm an entrepreneur, and I think business is inherently creative because, we are creating new physical things in the world. We're creating wealth, we're creating jobs, we're creating all this thing. So do you feel that everything you do is about creativity?
So creativity is actually a really important word in my life. In fact, I'm going to be writing my first traditional book coming up in 2017. And I'm using the word creative, or actually create, in the actual tagline, because I just believe so much in that word, because I think it's exciting to create. I think as humans, like when we hear the word create or creative, it kind of like gives a little warm spot in our hearts, because it's just like, wow, like this is something that I get to choose to make. We just love making things, whether it be physical or whether it be the written word or whether it be music, whatever it might be. Like, we just love to create. So I think creativity is a huge part of people's lives. So you have to give yourself the structure to create something meaningful. Again, otherwise you're just like a pinball in a pinball machine. You're getting bapped around. You're not creating everything. You're just reacting. So by giving yourself a disciplined schedule that you're going to execute on, you are actually giving yourself space for creativity of the best brain cells that you have for the day. And I keep going back to that because after you hopefully have gotten your nice 8 hours of sleep, I'm a big believer in getting at least 8 hours of sleep. I mean, people that say they get 4, 5, 6, like they're headed for burnout. It's happening. Like, it's just reality. But, so after you get that nice 8 hours of sleep and you get up and you have that nice morning routine, whatever that might be, now you're ready. Like, that's the best time of your day when you haven't yet just weighed down your brain yet with all these other things that are going on. And I'm not sure, Joanna, if you read the book Deep Work
yeah,
by Cal Newport.
Yeah, it's excellent.
But he uses in that book, he talks about the word residue a lot. And I think that was a really important word to kind of hone in on. Like, if you just like jump into Facebook, say beginning of the day before you do anything else, and then like you move on to your creative tasks, you're taking residue with you from that, social kind of nonsense time that you were on, even if you don't want to, even if it's a little bit subconscious. So just think about that, the residue that's there, and just realize the best time to do your creative work is when there's no residue.
No, I totally agree. Okay, so I want to get into the multiple streams of income idea, because you do, and you actually do income reports on your site, which I'll link to in the show notes, which are amazing, proving multiple streams of income. But what I'm interested in is, why did you decide to do a physical product when you make a really good living from online digital things?
Joanna, this is why your podcast is great. This is why you're great, because you ask the right questions. I mean, these are the right questions that I wish everybody would ask, because they're so important. So for me, I launched my business, as bootstrapping. I wasn't making money for a significant amount of time, like 9 months post-launch, like not a dollar came in. Then we started to slowly make some more money and start to generate some revenue. And that's when Kate and I looked at each other and said, hey, why not share exactly how we're making money so that other people can emulate our successes? And why not share with people how we're losing money and making mistakes and failures so people can avoid those failures? So 39 months ago, it's been a while now, we've been doing these monthly income reports. So there's 39 of them. I know you're going to link them up, but it's over at EOFire.com/income. They're all listed out right there. We've been doing these income reports to show people that you can deliver free, valuable, consistent content, which for me is my podcast, on a daily basis, and you can generate revenue off of that. You can create a business off of that, which is so important. So we were bootstrapping. We weren't making necessarily, a ton of money at the beginning. So it just made sense to create virtual products and to do things in the cloud and apps, because it's just a lower costs to get in on that. Things like physical products, like, this stuff costs money to make. I mean, there's faux leather, there's silver, leaf edges, there's bookmarks, there's bands. I mean, there's written pages in here. I had designers to do this. I mean, there's the whole 9 yards. And so when you first start, like, I don't think that you need to say, okay, I need to like go and do something that costs a lot of money, because, you might not yet be there with your audience that's going to be there, that knows, likes, and trusts you enough yet, that's going to support you enough on that bench to make it worthwhile. You might have to grow there. So doing something like an ebook or self-publishing a book or, a podcast or a course that, people can access online, that's a great way to start. And that's how we started generating revenue for sure. But then, fast forward 3 years later, we had been generating a lot of revenue, and the income was becoming very steady, and we could depend on it. So I said, okay, when everybody's zigging, everybody's doing this thing, which is creating ebooks or online or apps or SaaS products or virtual, whatever, which is amazing, by the way. And we still do all of that because it's great. But how can I zag with something else? How can I do something different? And that's when I said, well, listen, I can afford to write a check for $150,000 to have 30,000 of these pre-made, and I did. So that was huge, and I knew that like that kind of barrier was hard for people. Like I could have just done this as a PDF, and then the next thing anybody could have just come back up and done the very similar same thing as a PDF. And now how am I differentiating? Now it's a price bidding war and stuff like that. So by me raising the barrier, making that physical product that is super hard to replicate, because you got to invest. Again, I wrote a check for $150K. I had to, find the manufacturer. I had to find a way to logistically get it over to my distributor in the United States. I got to pay for the warehouse costs while it's waiting to be sold. All of these things. So the fact that I knew that this is going to be a differentiator for me, that this is going to be something that I could do that wasn't easily replicated, that made it to me huge. And so that's why I went the physical route. Happy to talk more about that, because I think it's a really good question and a fair question. And by the way, you don't have to start like I did by writing a check for $150K. Like I knew that I had a very large audience that was going to support this. In fact, I just wrote another check for $150K because we already need 30,000 more Freedom Journals. Like we just ordered them to come in more. So I knew I had that audience that was there. But you can start at a lower price point, knowing by the way, that it's going to be hard for people to replicate that because it's laying down those railroad tracks. The logistics is difficult, but because it's difficult, that puts you above the rest.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to come back to publishing. Obviously, most of my listeners do print through print on demand. So we're going to come back to distribution. I want to just, kind of wind it back to the design, the writing process and the design process, because I see this actually, you call it a journal, which is interesting. To me, a journal is kind of more plain, whereas this is more like a workbook, as in you're meant to do some work, aren't you? It's got, and I've got the Freedom one, but the Mastery one is the same. It's like, your thoughts are in there, there's quotes, and then there's kind of exercises for people to do. So how did you write and design it? How much did you do? How did you, and what did you implement the second time around that you learned the first time around with that process?
Yeah, so that's interesting. And, I actually should have probably consulted with you before going as far as I did with the Freedom Journal, because, you're right. Like, I don't really necessarily come from the literary world. So to me, like the word the Freedom Journal just sounded great. Whereas, frankly, the Freedom Workbook.
Yeah, no one wants to do any work.
Well, it's probably, but it's much more accurate, like you said, like accuracy level. It's much more the Freedom Workbook. But I don't think that would have sold as well as the Freedom Journal. I could have got into a deep story there, but I won't. But maybe we'll get to it later. Heck, no, I'll do it right now.
Yeah,
so, real quick story. Do you know a kiwi fruit? It used to be called Chinese gooseberries.
Yes.
They rebranded it to kiwi fruit, and sales went through the roof. Nobody wanted a Chinese gooseberry. Everybody wanted a kiwi fruit, though. So long story short, the Freedom Journal was because, I felt good about the name, and there is a lot of journaling aspect of it, but there's definitely a lot of workbook aspect to it. But kind of back to your core question, which was how much of it was mine. I will say that both the Freedom Journal and the Mastery Journal, everything, and I actually am looking for my other notebook that I have here, everything was written and designed by me. I'm not the designer, finishing touches, because I can't draw, but I would draw what I wanted, two people climbing a mountain. I would take a picture of it, send it to my actual designer, and she would make it amazing, but everything in there is me. So from, how the days are structured, to the different portions of it, which are the daily tasks, the nightly recaps, the 10-day sprints, the quarterly reviews. All of that came from right here. It was just me over the course of a year researching, studying about goals and how people succeeded with them and why people failed with them. And it just slowly kind of came together into what it is now. And I've actually just published the Freedom Journal 2.0, which, I mentioned I just ordered another 30,000. It's the same thing as the Freedom Journal, except there are some very decent tweaks within from some great feedback, from the first round of the Freedom Journal. So I'm really excited about that because, everything in the Freedom Journal came from here, and it wasn't 100%. It wasn't the best that it could be, and it never will be. All you can do is just keep improving a little bit, because the feedback that I got from, the current 16,000 plus people who have purchased a Freedom Journal is just out of this world. So we took that, implemented those things in the Freedom Journal 2.0 and went forward. So it's always a work in process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, there are so many ways to find a designer. And in fact, I think people now are overwhelmed by the choices of how to find a designer or an editor or whatever. So did you use your community, or did you use anything specific to find your team?
I actually used my community. I think that's a great way to do it. We had a woman that reached out and said, John, I love your stuff. I'm a designer. This is what I do. She was like, frankly, I think your logo is pretty average. And, here's what I would do if I was your designer. And our designer, and our logo was pretty average. We had used 99 Designs, which is great. But we had used it a couple of years ago. It was kind of getting a little dated. And what she came back with, as you can kind of see right now for the new updated logo, was just amazing. We're like, that's it. And we're like, what else do you do? And so we started giving her one-off tasks. She just kept getting better and better and better. Now we actually have her on retainer for 40 hours per month. So she is our designer for 40 hours a month. And sometimes, we go over that when we have big pushes like the current thing, the Mastery Journal. So that's how we found it. But, I think 99 Designs is a great place. I have a lot of people who have done that and who ended up picking the winner of their logo, and then ended up hiring that person individually going forward. So there's a lot of great ways to do it. And I think that, 99 Designs, Elance, Virtual Staff Finder. Those are all great places to find great designers.
Okay, cool. And then, you printed this in China. So this whole production process, and again, everyone's like, oh my goodness, I could get ripped off. That's probably the biggest thing everyone thinks. Oh no, if I send money to China, it'll disappear and never come. So how did you investigate that actual production process?
So key and so scary, because Alibaba, like, you hear people rave about that, but man, is that like a pyramid scheme? It's like the worst. I mean, you go there and like people are being like, yes, here's my manufacturing plant. But like, they're like 7 middlemen between that person and it's unbelievable what's going on with there. So if people have had good experiences with Alibaba, like, good for you. But like, I was just like, I give up. Like, I'm never going to create a physical product. But I actually ended up going through this great company because he was a past guest of my show. So again, building relationships. His name's Richie Norton. He has a company called Product, as combining the word proud and product. So Product. And so product.com is his website. And that's what they do. Like, they have a team that's, a couple of them are based in China, and they actually fly people over to China all the time. They speak Mandarin, and they go out hoofs on the ground, feet on the ground. And they are literally knocking on doors and like making relationships and building and actually vetting out the manufacturing plant and making sure everything's legit, that the workers, are of age and everything looks good and great in there. So it was an amazing experience. They negotiated everything for me. Now I have like such a great relationship like with this manufacturing plant that they actually sent me a happy birthday video, which was like hysterical, or like the workers lined up and all saying happy birthday to me. And actually, and this was last year. Random side note, today's my birthday.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yeah. I'm 37.
Oh, wow. I'm thrilled you're on the show.
Yay. And yeah, there's no place I'd rather be on my birthday.
Of course.
And, so they sent me a birthday video, and so I just felt like I had this relationship with them, and it was so cool. It was great. And, so I knew that when I went with the Mastery Journal that there was like, there was no even second guessing where I was going. I mean, this was a proven commodity. So going through a company like Product was really key, and I loved it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And then, of course, the next thing is, so they've been produced and you're happy, and presumably they did like a test one, and you signed it off and everything. Yeah. And then I was having a look at how you're selling it. So first of all, you did a Kickstarter. So you had the pre-orders, but then you also have, it looks like, Amazon fulfillment. So you have warehousing, and you're also using Shopify. So how are you doing that distribution and you're not sitting there in a warehouse shipping stuff. That is not your job. So
Thank goodness.
Yeah, no. I know. How are you doing that?
I'm doing a little birthday sale right now for the Freedom Journal today only. So, we're just doing a ton of sales. So luckily, I'm not the person there or we wouldn't be able to talk right now, but I'm here in Puerto Rico. It's happening. So I'll kind of maybe complete the dots right here. So after the 30,000 were printed in China, they throw them on a boat, and it's not that expensive to ship them over. It's not super cheap, but we're talking 30,000 books. That's like over like 30 million pages of paper. It's insane. They would show me pictures of like the room. It was just like full of paper. Like, it was crazy to look at like how much quantity 30,000 300-page journals are. It's crazy. It's amazing what they can do. And so they shipped over the 30,000. It cost about like $6,000 to do that shipment. Because again, you go on the slow boats or just like in a container. So it's pretty reasonable to ship 30,000 Freedom Journals is $6,000. So it's like you're basically paying $1. No, sorry, not even close to that. You're paying like 20 cents per book to get it shipped over here. Which is pretty amazing considering now that the books are in the United States. To get them anywhere in the U.S., I'm paying like $7 to get one, but I was paying 20 cents to get one from China to the U.S. In that kind of bulk, of course. So it lands in the port of L.A., and there's a distribution company called ShipWire, and that's who I use. So it's called shipwire.com. They're the company that I use to hold all of the books. They kind of, so I pay them as a warehouse and then as a pick and packer. So all of my books are there, every single one. And then when somebody orders, like, there's actually an actual person that will go grab the book, And then it goes through the process and gets shipped out. So it's an all automatic. It's a fully functioning 24/7 warehouse. That's pretty reasonable cost for all of that. I think it's like $2.25, that I pay like that guy to go pick the book and put it on. So it's a pretty reasonable like pick and pack cost. And then it's like $5 per book for media mail, because media mail is pretty reasonable, which is where you get to about like $7.25 to get a book to anywhere in the U.S. And then I also just signed up on Amazon FBA, so fulfillment by Amazon. And then whenever my inventories get low there, I'll literally just ship like 500 Freedom Journals from Shipwire to Amazon, and they'll just Amazon will take them in, process them, and then they sell them, and that's how that works.
So Shipwire does your Shopify.
Yes,
and also does
Shopify.
Right, and that's the sale through your website as well, goes to them, and then you have some with Amazon for Amazon fulfillment. Okay, no, that works. And I mean, what's so crazy with this? And I mean, obviously, the way you're doing it is you've got a low cost per book, and a high price, but
yes.
The profit margin on physical product, especially books, is pretty shocking compared to an online course. So, but you've done this again. Like if you'd have just done this once, I would have gone, that was just, you made some money, but hey, it was a nightmare.
But it might not be worth it.
Yes, right. But you've done it again. So I guess now you're leveraging the knowledge, but you're now moving to traditional publishing. So is this something that does this make enough profit to bother with? Or, are you looking now to kind of move into that traditional level because they are good at that stuff? Yeah.
So at my level right now, because I'm able to get the books printed, for $6 per book. So it's not cheap to print one of these things. I mean, $6 is a lot of money to pay for, a journal to be created. But the fact that I'm able to, pay $6 and then, add on the other costs, which would be the 20 cents per book to ship it over to here, add on, maybe another 25 cents to actually get it into the warehouse, et cetera. I'm at, somewhere around $7 per book, and I sell it for $39 per book. So that $32 is a net profit for me on every single sale of a journal. So it's significant. We typically do over $20,000 of net profit per month of Freedom Journal sales. So that's net profit.
It's pretty good.
So it makes sense. Again, we do $60,000 to $70,000 per month on sponsorships for EOFire, which is, frankly, a lot less work. It's all virtual. There's none of this. So, I get the arguments on both sides, but at the same time, just like I also just love.
Yeah, I was going to say, you just love it.
Take pictures of the Mastery Journal and themselves. I love the fact that I am a believer that because it's physical and beautiful and people actually have to invest $39 to get this into their home, that they're going to actually have a much higher chance of succeeding because they've already made that commitment to themselves financially. Now it's time to follow through on that. So that is something, that I feel like it works. I'm proud of, what it is and like the excitement that people get when it arrives. I just like all of that. So to me, that's cool. It just makes everything feel real.
Oh, yeah. And that's the people listening. We all know that. That's why we do what we do. We're authors because we love that stuff. And then, so have you even bothered with physical bookstores across the US? Because, presumably you could get distribution.
Yeah, I'd like to still consider that at some point. I haven't gone down that road just because, I just frankly have been focusing on other things. Because I will say when I went to do my initial research on journals, I went to like the local Barnes and Noble and like bought all the journals that were there. And they were just, frankly crappy, and they weren't high quality, and they didn't really have any kind of a flow. I'm just talking about the journals, like the actual faux leather journals that were there. So I really feel like if the Freedom Journal was on a shelf at one of those stores, that it would do really well. Because it would look beautiful compared to the other ones. It's just everything, like you open it up, the first thing we have is the top 3 reasons why you'll love the Freedom Journal, which to me will just draw people in. So that is something that I might explore down the road. But again, I just kind of haven't gotten around to it yet.
And what about print on demand? Because there's print on demand has got a lot better now, and you can do hardback, and you can do edging, and you can do embossing. So is that something you'll consider down the line, or will you keep doing?
I think I'm definitely going to do print on demand for my traditional book. What is your favorite right now of the print on demands?
Well, it's interesting, you were talking about standing out. I'm actually now moving into a more of a publishing company. So I'm working with Ingram, and, actually, because I think you're right. I think digital's pretty full. And if you have more physical product, more hardback and that type of thing, it's really interesting. So I'm developing stuff with Ingram, and there's some interesting technology coming out. I'll have to email you next year when it's ready.
Yeah.
But where you can actually do this kind of print on demand, a bit like Shopify, but directly from your site directly to the printer. So it might even kind of help with that. But it was just a question.
Is 3D printing having any kind of a play in that?
I'm looking at doing some 3D printing with patterns and things with books, but more for fiction. But 3D printing's not really for books.
Not for books.
No, more like for products that would go with it. But anyway, just coming back to so the publishing side. So you talked about doing iterations. You're a guy who likes control. You like creative stuff. How is this traditional publishing deal going to work when you're so used to being in control?
Yeah, I think it'll be a challenge, but that's one of those things where I do believe that all the magic happens outside of your comfort zone. And so I've kind of been in my comfort zone with a lot of things. I make sure that with other things I'm getting out of it. And this would be an example. This would be getting me out of my comfort zone. I'd be trying new things. So I think it'll be a challenge. But I think at the same time, that getting out of my comfort zone, being challenged and trying new things, and it'll just give me more stuff to talk about and do my JLD rants on.
Absolutely. Well, we're almost out of time, but I want to ask you about book marketing before we finish up, because we all the listeners have books. We all have books, lots of them in some cases, and book marketing is probably the hardest part. So you sell through the podcast, and your podcast is not something, it's something I recommend people listen to, but don't try it at home. Doing a daily show, is hardcore. You are so hardcore. But how has the podcast become the method of book sales, basically?
Yeah, it's really interesting. And someone that I point to a lot, who's a really good example, that is not didn't go the route that I went, but went a different route. He was an author kind of first, Michael Port. He wrote some great New York Times best-selling books, and he did this and he did that. And then, like about a year ago, he actually, shot me an email, and he was like, hey, I'm coming with this new book, Steal the Show. What do you think I should do to market it? And I'm like, well, how many chapters is the book? He's like, about 20. I'm like, well, let's do a 20 episode season called Steal the Show, and then launch the podcast. And every single episode 1 will be just a little summation of chapter 1, and then same thing with chapter 2 and chapter 3 and episode 4, 5, and so on and so forth. And he liked the idea. He actually sat down in 1 week and just kind of scripted out and recorded out all 20 of the episodes, launched the season, and the podcast ended up doing so well that he just called me up and he's like, John, I gotta keep doing this. What do I do? He's like, I don't want the season to end. I'm like, no, end the season, and then after a week, open up season 2, and season 2 can be something else. And so I think that that's a great strategy for a lot of people. That we know that there's a lot of good traditional book marketing channels, but now what you want to do is do those that work. But now how can you market your book in ways that not every other author is marketing their book as well? So you're not screaming into this room that's already full of people screaming, and the podcast was a great way for Michael Port to do that, which was really cool. So that was one thing that I was really impressed with that he did for book marketing. Something that I do is in the intros and outros of my podcast, I give calls to action for the Freedom Journal, for the Mastery Journal. I definitely do those things. I actually sponsor other podcasts. So I pay Pat Flynn real money. It's not cheap, real money to be a sponsor of his podcast. So January 25th, February 1st, February 7th, and February 15th, those 4 episodes of his podcast, while I'm launching the Mastery Journal, I've sponsored his episodes. And so that is going to be amazing. But what I love about that is it's going to actually be evergreen as well, because, my call to action is go to themasteryjournal.com, which during those 33 days will take people to the Kickstarter campaign. But afterwards, it'll just take people to a webpage where they can just buy, where they like the Freedom Journal webpage is now, they can just purchase the book through Shopify.
No, that's fantastic. And I think that evergreen marketing is a really good point, because most authors and most publishers make their money from the backlist. Stuff you might have done years ago, you're still making money on. So that is really so important. Okay, so just to finish up, just tell people what they can expect in the Mastery Journal. And also you said it once, but say it again. Where can they get it, and what can they expect?
Well, no, thank you for the opportunity. It was great chatting today. And, this is my passion project. It's the Mastery Journal. The Freedom Journal was definitely a passion project, but the Mastery Journal is a little different for me, because these are my 3 greatest strengths that I worked really hard to master. And so the Mastery Journal is a guide, a step-by-step guide that will teach you how to master productivity, how to master discipline, and how to master focus in 100 days. Because I believe in Parkinson's law. Tasks will expand to the time allotted. So that's why we have 100 days for you to master these 3 skills. So, real quick, productivity, what are you producing of quality on a day-to-day basis? That's critical. So the Mastery Journal guides you on how to actually start producing quality work, and you actually self-evaluate yourself with a score every day on how you did. Same thing with discipline. You are forced, whether you want to or not, against your will, to develop a plan every single day and execute that plan so that you can be a disciple to yourself, to your business, to your life. You deserve it. The Mastery Journal will guide you there. And then, of course, focus. Follow one course until success. It's my favorite acronym. I will teach you how to put those blinders on, how to drown out the weapons of mass distraction, and how to get stuff done. It's not easy to get stuff done in this world. The Mastery Journal will ensure that you do. And we're doing a Kickstarter campaign from January 23rd to February 24th of 2017. We've also, Joanna, partnered up with Pencils of Promise. And we did the same thing with Freedom Journal last year. I ended up writing a check for $75,000 to Pencils of Promise on behalf of the Freedom Journal supporters. We're continuing to do the same thing with the Mastery Journal. So if you give yourself the gift of mastering these 3 skills, you're also giving the gift of education to those less fortunate. And everything happens at themasteryjournal.com.
That's fantastic. And also just tell people where they can find your show and everything else you do online.
Yeah, we have a cool website, EOFire.com. And what's cool is we have a ton of resources for entrepreneurs that are free. We love creating free courses. We have a free course on how to podcast, do webinars, funnels, how to accomplish goals, all for free on our EOFire.com website.
That's fantastic. And just, personally, I really recommend your site to anyone who wants to know about podcasting, because you're the man. You really are.
Thank you.
Oh, no worries. Right. Well, you have a lovely birthday, and it was lovely to talk to you. Thanks so much for your time, John.
Thanks, Joanna. Bye.